The text message came through at 6:18 on a Friday evening, and I was standing in the parking garage of a federal courthouse in Charlotte, North Carolina. Briefcase in one hand, car keys in the other, 3 minutes from driving home after a 12-hour day. My phone lit up. The sender was my brother's wife, Claudia. The message read, "We've already left. The house is ours now. You should have been smarter." I stood there under the flickering fluorescent light of level 3. Read it once, then twice, then put my phone in my bag and drove home. Not because I wasn't affected, because I had been waiting for exactly that message for 4 months, and I had already done everything that needed doing before it arrived. My name is Sloane Mercer. I'm 32 years old. For the past 7 years, I have worked as a contract compliance analyst for a mid-size firm that services federal construction projects. What that means, practically, is that I spend my days finding the places where paperwork has been manipulated, where signatures don't match dates, where one document says one thing and a second document says another. I am paid to find inconsistencies before they become liabilities. I am very good at it. My brother Derek is 4 years older than me. Growing up, he was the one my parents called Golden, not because he was cruel or even particularly arrogant, but because he had a way of filling a room that made people want to hand things to him. Charm is the word people use. I always thought of it more as a kind of gravitational pull that other people's resources had toward him, naturally, without anyone quite noticing the direction of movement until it was already done. He married Claudia 8 years ago. She is smart in the specific way that people who have spent their lives studying other people are smart. She reads situations quickly. She knows what to say and when to say nothing. In the early years, I liked her. Later, I understood that what I had taken for warmth was actually attention, and attention is a tool that can be used in more than one direction. Our mother passed away 3 years ago. Ovarian cancer? 14 months from diagnosis to end. She left behind a small estate, a house in Concord that had been in the family for 22 years, and a will that split everything equally between Derek and me. The house was appraised at $460,000. Neither of us was in a position to buy the other out immediately, so we agreed in writing to co-own it and rent it for 2 years while we each saved toward a resolution. That was the agreement, signed, notarized, filed with the county clerk. What actually happened was that Derek and Claudia moved in 9 months later. They had been renting an apartment in Gastonia, and Derek told me their landlord was not renewing the lease. He said it would just be temporary. 3 months, maybe 4, while they got their finances sorted. He said it would be good for the house to have someone in it, full-time, rather than a rotating tenant situation. And I heard the logic in that even while something quieter in me noted the way he had already decided before he called to ask. I said yes. I told myself it was practical. That was 26 months ago. During those 26 months, I received $900 in total toward the shared property expenses. The mortgage on the house was mine alone to carry because my name was the only one on the original refinancing my mother had done 6 years prior. The property taxes were $2,200 a year. The homeowner's insurance was $1,400. Derek and Claudia paid for their groceries and their streaming subscriptions, and twice they sent me a Venmo for $300 each time with a note that said catching up soon, and I thanked them and made a note in my records because I am who I am. The first thing I noticed that was not just inconvenient but specifically wrong was in January, about 18 months in. I was home for a long weekend and I found a folder on the kitchen table, left there the way people sometimes leave things when they forget you're going to be there. It contained printed pages. Property ownership records from the Cabarrus County Register of Deeds. My name. The parcel number. The legal description. Notes in Claudia's handwriting in the margins, small and neat. One said, "Ask about adverse possession." Another said, "Check survivorship language." I took 3 photographs of those pages on my phone before I put the folder back exactly where I found it. Then I went for a drive and called my attorney. Her name is Patricia O.C. She has been practicing real estate and civil litigation in Charlotte for 19 years, and she has the particular quality of being completely unsurprisable, which is what I needed in that moment and in every moment that followed. When I described what I had found, she was quiet for 4 seconds, which for Patricia is the equivalent of a sharp intake of breath. And then she said, "How long have they been there?" And I told her, and she said we need to move carefully and we need to move now. What followed was not fast. It was the opposite of fast. It was 4 months of precise, documented, and visible work done at a pace that would not tip anything. Patricia explained the exposure. Adverse possession in North Carolina requires 20 years of continuous, open, and hostile occupation, so Derek and Claudia were nowhere near a legal claim on those grounds. But there were other angles. A quiet title action, if they filed one, could tie the property up in litigation for a year. More concerning was the joint ownership structure itself. Because Derek was co-owner of record, he theoretically had the right to initiate a partition action, which would force a court-ordered sale. If they had been working toward that, the folder suggested they had been researching the timing. Patricia brought in a title specialist named Raymond Chu, who had spent 15 years doing exactly this kind of documentation. Raymond did a full chain of title review. What he found was that 3 months prior, Derek had contacted the county recorder's office requesting information about amending the deed. The inquiry was on record. He had not filed anything yet. But the inquiry told us the direction of travel. We moved first. Patricia drafted a formal co-ownership agreement with partition terms that locked in a mandatory mediation clause before any court action could be initiated, requiring 90 days of documented negotiation first. This was not unusual for co-owned property. I presented it to Derek as a formality, something my firm's in-house counsel had recommended for liability reasons. I told him it was standard. He signed it at my kitchen table on a Tuesday night while Claudia made tea in the other room, and I watched him sign his name without reading past the first paragraph. And I felt something I can only describe as a very particular kind of sadness. Then I began the financial documentation. Every mortgage payment, dated, with confirmation numbers. Every property tax receipt. Every insurance renewal. The $900 total they had contributed, also documented to the cent. Patricia said this record would establish my disproportionate contribution to the asset, which under North Carolina equitable distribution principles would factor into any partition valuation. I also installed a monitored security system, not hidden, fully disclosed, mounted cameras at the front door, back entry, and the detached garage where I kept a storage unit with my mother's remaining belongings. I told Derek it was for the house's insurance rating. He said sure and went back to watching television. I set up a secondary alert on the county property records portal for any filings associated with the parcel number. Then I went back to Charlotte and went to work and waited. The consulting project that took me to Charlotte on that Friday was a 6-week federal contract audit I had been assigned in late March. I told Derek and Claudia 3 weeks in advance that I would be working long hours and likely staying in the city several nights a week. I watched Claudia's expression when I said it, the way it shifted and then settled, and I recognized the shape of that shift because I had been watching for it. I left on a Monday morning with a single overnight bag. On Wednesday of the second week, the property records alert fired at 4:47 in the afternoon, a deed modification filing. Derek's name as sole grantor, a quitclaim deed removing my name from the title, signed with what appeared to be my signature, notarized by someone I had never heard of, submitted to the Cabarrus County Register of Deeds. A forged deed, filed on a Wednesday afternoon in April. I was sitting in a conference room in uptown Charlotte when the alert came through. I read it twice. Then I forwarded it to Patricia. Then I texted Raymond. Then I went back to the meeting I was in for 45 more minutes because there was nothing I could do in the next 45 minutes that would matter more than maintaining my composure in front of a federal contracting officer. When the meeting ended, I walked to the stairwell and stood there for a moment with my hand flat against the cold painted concrete wall. I was angry in a way that had no edge to it, the kind of anger that is so total it becomes something steadier than anger. Then I called Patricia. She had already seen the alert. Raymond was already on the phone with the county recorder's office. She told me to come to her office the next morning. She told me not to contact Derek or Claudia. She told me the deed filing was criminally actionable under North Carolina General Statute 14-122, which covers fraudulent execution of deeds, a felony. She said we needed to be methodical. I was methodical. It is the only thing I know how to be. That Thursday morning, Patricia filed an emergency title dispute with the county recorder's office, attaching my original notarized ownership documents, the co-ownership agreement Derek had signed, and a formal affidavit stating that the signature on the quitclaim deed was not mine. The recorder's office flagged the filing immediately for fraud review. The deed modification was suspended pending investigation within 4 hours of Patricia's filing. Raymond cross-referenced the notary stamp on the forged document against the state notary registry. The notary listed did exist, but their commission had expired 11 months prior. An expired notary stamp on a deed filing is not an administrative error, it is evidence. Patricia also contacted the Cabarrus County Sheriff's Office Property Crimes Unit. A detective named Sergeant Victor Allard was assigned by Friday morning. The text from Claudia came that same Friday evening, 6:18 in the parking garage. We've already left. The house is ours now. You should have been smarter. I drove home to my apartment in Charlotte. I poured myself a glass of water. I sat at my kitchen table and thought about my mother, who had bought that house when I was 10 years old, who had painted the front door red because she said red doors meant the people inside were not afraid to be found. I let myself feel that for a while. Then I called Patricia and told her about the text, and she said, "Perfect, document and forward," which I did, and she said now we wait for the weekend to be over, which I did. On Monday morning, Sergeant Allard executed a welfare check at the property, which is a standard mechanism for gaining access when the occupants are believed to have vacated. The house was empty. Derek and Claudia had loaded a moving truck over the weekend and driven to what I later learned was a rental property in Myrtle Beach that Claudia's college friend managed. What they had taken, furniture that belonged to the shared estate, including a dining set my mother had bought in 1987 and 3 pieces of her original artwork. Electronics. The contents of the detached garage storage unit, which included my mother's cedar jewelry box, her winter coat collection she had kept since the 80s, and a box of photographs from my parents' first years together that I had been intending to have digitized. What they had not counted on, I had photographed, cataloged, and insured every item in that storage unit 6 weeks prior. I had the appraisal records. I had the insurance rider. I had the photographs with metadata timestamps. What they had also not counted on, the security camera at the garage captured 12 minutes of footage of Claudia directing the loading of my mother's belongings into the truck. Her face was visible at multiple points. Derek's voice was audible giving instructions. The footage time-stamped automatically to a private cloud server they had no access to. Patricia filed the full criminal complaint with the sheriff's office on Tuesday morning. Sergeant Allard and a second detective drove to Myrtle Beach on Thursday of the following week. I know this because Claudia called me at 9:47 that Thursday morning and I let it go to voicemail. Then Derek called. I let that go as well. Then Claudia called again and on the second attempt I answered. She did not say hello. Her voice was high and compressed in the way voices get when fear is passing through them. She said, "There are police here, Sloane. What did you do? Tell them to leave. This is a misunderstanding." I was at my desk at work. I had a document open on one monitor and my phone in my hand, and out my window I could see the Charlotte skyline in the flat gray light of a November morning. "What misunderstanding?" I said. "The house," she said. "Derek's name was on the deed." "Both our names were on the deed," I said. "Were. This is family," she said. "I'm aware," I said. She made a sound that was not quite a word, somewhere between a breath and something louder, and then she said, "You're doing this because you're jealous of what Derek and I have built," and I thought about that for a moment, about what exactly they had built, and then I said, "I have to get back to work, Claudia," and ended the call. I wrote down the exact time and the exact content of that conversation within 2 minutes of hanging up, in a dated document I had been keeping since January. Patricia said later it was the cleanest contemporaneous record she had seen outside of professional depositions. Derek called me that night. He had a different register than Claudia, quieter, with something in it that sounded almost like confusion, as if he had been surprised by consequences that were, from my view, about as surprising as gravity. He said he thought the house should have been his. He said our mother had always meant for him to have it. He said I had never needed it the way he did. I thought about our mother. I thought about the 14 months I had spent driving to Concord on weekends, sitting in that house, learning which medications she needed and in which order and at which hours, because Derek had been too busy to manage the schedule. I thought about the funeral arrangements, which I handled, and the estate paperwork, which took 4 months and which I completed alone at my kitchen table in the evenings after work. I thought about the red door and what she had said about not being afraid to be found. I did need it, I said. It was hers and then it was ours, and you signed an agreement and you had a choice. He was quiet. I hope you get some help, I said. I mean that. And then I hung up. The legal process that followed was not brief or cinematic. It was depositions and county filings and 3 separate court dates spread over 5 months. The forged deed charge went forward as a felony under the statute Patricia had cited. The notary fraud added a second charge. Derek's attorney negotiated a plea on the deed forgery that included restitution, 5 years probation with conditions, and a permanent civil judgment in my favor for the value of removed property. Claudia's negotiation was separate. Her agreement included restitution for the estate items, a civil judgment, and 60 days of community service, with a suspended sentence that would activate if the restitution schedule was violated. The estate items were returned in part. The furniture came back. Most of my mother's artwork. The jewelry box. The photographs. 3 of her coats were missing and were never recovered, and that is the part I do not think about on good days and think about too much on bad ones. The total financial recovery between the property judgment, the estate restitution, and the insurance claim for the items not returned came to approximately 93% of documented losses. I kept the house. I paid Derek's share of the equity value in a structured buyout arranged through the civil judgment, which offset against what he owed me, which left him receiving approximately $14,000 that he would not have received at all had he simply kept his name on a legitimate deed and waited. That is the number I find the most clarifying when I think about what they were actually trying to accomplish. I repainted the front door in October. The same red my mother had chosen, matched from a photograph I found in the box that came back. I did it myself on a Saturday morning, brush in hand, music on my phone propped against the porch railing, paint smell sharp in the cool air. And when I stepped back and looked at it finished, I stood there for longer than I expected to. The house is mine now, in full. I go on weekends sometimes. I sit in the kitchen where the light comes in from the east window in the mornings, and I drink coffee and I think about what my mother built there and what she left behind and what I am still in the process of understanding about both. I have not spoken to Derek since the final court date. He did not make eye contact with me when the judge read the terms. I don't know if that was shame or something else. I have stopped trying to translate him. There is one thing I want to say directly to you. People who take from family count on a specific thing above everything else. They count on the fact that you love them, and they have decided that love means you will absorb the loss, rather than document it. They count on you feeling too guilty to file a report, too afraid of being seen as cold, to enforce what is legally and morally yours. They call preparation a trap. They call documentation cruelty. They call your records a betrayal. What I did was notice, pay attention, protect what my mother worked 22 years to leave behind. The records I kept were not a weapon. They were just the truth, written down in order, which is all a record ever is. The door is red again. That is the part that matters most to me. Not the judgment, not the 93%, not even the 5 months of watching the legal process move the way it is supposed to move when you have done everything correctly. The door. The specific red she chose. The fact that it is still there. If there is someone in your life right now who has been slowly, quietly teaching you that protecting yourself is a betrayal of them, I want you to sit with what that lesson is actually costing you. Because the people who depend on your silence are not the people who deserve your loyalty. And the things that are yours, the things that were built for you, the things that carry the weight of the people you've lost, those things are worth the paperwork.